Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is episode 18, and today we're doing what we always aim to do here, taking a really fascinating source and digging deep to find insights that, hopefully matter to you.
That's right.
We're exploring Essentials of Practicing Buddhism, which is a key teaching from Buddhist Master Lu. Now, Master Lu is known internationally for promoting Buddhist teachings and also Chinese culture, and he's very widely followed for his compassionate approach. If you're curious and want to learn more about his background, we actually did a deep dive on that way back in episode 1, so check that out.
Yeah, good place to start for context.
Our mission today, though, is to unpack this specific text, pull out its core wisdom, and really discover how these ancient teachings can offer, practical guidance for our lives right now.
It's quite a direct text, isn't it?
It is. Oh, and just a quick note, this deep dive is brought to you by a nonprofit effort.
And it really aims to bridge that gap, between the philosophy and just everyday living. Offers a kind of path for internal change.
Okay, so let's dive into that first principle because it feels foundational.
Cause and effect, right? But tied specifically to cultivation. It's that classic reaping what you sow. But the text seems to frame it as more active, like you're participating in creating things.
That's a really good way to put it. It emphasizes that the outcomes, your spiritual growth, your inner state, they aren't random. They're the direct result, the harvest of the effort and intention you plant.
Right.
It puts the responsibility, and maybe the power too, squarely back on you, the individual.
And it talks about the role of a master and disciple within that. It's not just about learning stuff, is it?
No, not just accumulating knowledge. The text is pretty clear. The purpose is gaining the skills to actually help other people, to awaken spiritually yourself and, elevate your own spiritual level.
So personal growth isn't the final stop. It's more like building the capacity to be useful.
Exactly. And there's a direct link made between that internal state and what the text calls afflictions.
Afflictions, like worries, negative thoughts, that kind of thing. Yeah, essentially distracting thoughts, obsessions, the stuff that clouds the mind and, causes suffering.
So the idea is the more you cultivate, the higher your spiritual state gets.
The fewer afflictions bother you.
Yeah.
According to the text, the higher your level of spirituality, the fewer afflictions you will have. On the contrary, the lower your spiritual state, the more afflictions you will experience.
Wow. Okay. A direct relationship.
It suggests your internal landscape kind of dictates how much you get knocked around by those mental disturbances.
And all the practices it mentions, praying, reciting sutras, cultivating the mind, it seems to give them just one single purpose.
Which is?
Getting rid of ignorance and bad habits.
Yeah.
It sort of strips away any idea you're doing it for some external reward.
Right. It simplifies the path. The aim is internal purification, shedding those layers of misunderstanding and unwholesome tendencies that keep us stuck in suffering. It's focused effort toward inner clarity.
There's a passage that really nails this foundation, I think.
Let's hear it, the text says. Firstly, everyone must understand that when it comes to cultivation, you always reap what you sow. When it comes to cultivation, it ultimately relies on your potential for enlightenment.
You always reap what you sow. If you really think about that, every action, every thought, even habits, they're like seeds. If you put off a work task, you reap stress later, right?
Yeah.
But if you consistently practice, say, learning an instrument, you eventually reap fluency. It feels empowering, actually.
Because you're creating the future experience.
Exactly. And thinking about those afflictions. If you consciously try to focus on positive thoughts, like gratitude, that is the cultivation, isn't it? That leads to less stress.
It becomes the practice itself.
Yeah. It's like setting a clear goal. That focus helps you cut away the distractions and bad habits that block you. It shifts from just wanting a better outcome to actively building the mindset that produces it.
It really highlights that personal agency within what it presents as a universal law. You're the gardener of your life, not just someone things happen to.
Okay, so moving from those internal principles, the text also looks outward, doesn't it? Tackling the transient nature of life. Impermanence.
Yes, that's a huge theme. It reminds us pretty starkly that life, from birth to death, it's all temporary.
It gets very specific, too, about the physical body. It mentions skin and flesh from the mother, bones from the father, and links injuries to parental karmic obstacles.
Ah, yes. That passage, it says, The flesh of the human body was given to us by our mother, while the bones were provided by our father. Injured skin and flesh are therefore usually the results of the mother's karmic obstacles, while broken bones point to the obstacles stemming from the father.
Okay.
It's important, I think, to present that as a specific belief or tenet within this particular teaching. We're just relaying what the source says here.
Got it. And the broader point from all this impermanence seems to be
Yeah.
there's nothing we can really hold on to because everything will pass.
Which is arguably the root of a lot of suffering, trying to cling to things that are inherently changing. So recognizing that is presented as a key step toward maybe detachment and peace.
It then offers this interesting angle on extending your life through cultivation, like reciting sutras. It's not about wanting more time for yourself.
No, not at all, actually. The text is explicit. The purpose isn't personal gain, but to save other sentient beings. And it clarifies this includes your own family, your loved ones.
So living longer just means more opportunity to practice and help.
That's the reframing, yes.
There's a really striking line in this part.
Which one?
Let me see. Here. Life begins with a few cries and ends with a sigh. Even if it is to save your child, they are also regarded as but one among many sentient beings.
That line about the child.
Yeah, regarded as but one among many sentient beings. It really puts relationships into this wider context of universal compassion, doesn't it?
It does broaden the perspective.
Think about watching kids grow up. It happens so fast. It's a constant, sometimes kind of painful reminder of impermanence.
True.
Or how even really intense experiences, good or bad, they eventually fade. The text seems to say clinging to those moments or people is ultimately, well, futile. The more lasting purpose, the path to less suffering, is about directing your energy to help all beings.
Recognizing that interconnectedness.
Right, instead of just focusing attachment on a few. It gives impermanence an active spin. Every moment is a chance to act with compassion.
It really expands that circle of concern beyond just me and mine.
And where we direct our energy. That connects so well to the next point, the power of our thoughts. There's that concise phrase, life is but a breath, happiness is but a thought.
Profound, isn't it? Packed into just a few words. It argues our internal state, our happiness or unhappiness, isn't just a reaction to stuff happening out there. It's profoundly shaped by the thoughts we choose or maybe just allow to dominate our minds.
The text explains it simply. If you think of something happy, you'll become happy straight away. If you harbor hatred towards somebody, the thought will only make you unhappy. It's a simple concept. Joy and sorrow are all but thoughts.
Very direct.
And it links those momentary slips or lapses in judgment, the foolish things we do, straight back to these uncontrolled thoughts.
These lapses, according to this teaching, happen because we haven't cultivated discipline over our minds, which is why the core lesson here is learning how to restrain ourselves.
Restraint, but not like suppression.
No, more like intelligent control. Awareness and direction of the mind.
Okay, let's hear the full passage on this.
Right. The text states, life is but a breath. Happiness is but a thought. When we breathe no longer, our life ends. That's why we must learn how to restrain ourselves.
Happiness is but a thought. That is.
Yeah.
Wow, it gives you so much agency. Like if you dwell on some small irritation, someone was rude, you're stuck in traffic, that single thought can hijack your whole mood.
Absolutely. It can ruin your day.
But if you choose to focus on something positive or even just accept the situation without adding negative judgment, it completely changes how you experience that moment. Think about pausing before reacting when you're angry. That pause is restraint, right? It stops a thought-driven reaction you'd likely regret. Or it's like the difference between mindless doom scrolling and choosing to do something that actually feels satisfying. Your thoughts are the steering wheel.
It positions the mind as the main arena, really, the source of both suffering and freedom. So cultivating that awareness and restraint is key.
Let's take a short break. When we return, we'll explore how the text reframes happiness and suffering, revealing that one often gives rise to the other.
The text also kind of flips our usual idea of comfort on its head. It suggests growth comes from difficulty, not ease, comparing it to a flower needing rain to blossom, not just sunshine.
Yes, the principle of growth through tribulation, hardships, challenges, setbacks. They aren't just unfortunate obstacles here. They're presented as almost necessary conditions for developing resilience, deepening wisdom, learning to appreciate things.
Even call setbacks a blessing.
It does. It argues that enduring difficulties helps us cherish things more, improves our ability to see things clearly, discern truth, and it circles back to impermanence while the external world changes. Sincere practice like recitation offers internal stability and hope for positive change, even when things are tough outside.
There's also that interesting point about happiness itself being temporary.
Right, the text notes, only through hardships can we attain happiness. Happiness itself also entails suffering, as extreme happiness would simply turn into sorrow.
That's a fascinating twist. Even peak happiness isn't stable. It suggests maybe grasping at any extreme, even positive ones, leads to imbalance.
Perhaps true peace lies less in the peak and more in a grounded, non-reactive state that's built by facing difficulties.
Can we hear the passage with the flower analogy?
Sure, it reads, "To make the flower of our life blossom, all of you must comprehend the gist of this message." It implies the hardship is what allows the blossoming.
Learning from failure is such a clear example. A project bombs at work, a relationship ends. Those hard times teach you resilience, maybe strategy, self-awareness in ways smooth sailing just doesn't.
You learn what doesn't work.
Exactly. And appreciating simple things, health, quiet time, a good meal that often hits hardest after a rough patch. And the lottery example is classic, right? Winning big seems like ultimate happiness, but it often brings huge problems.
It reinforces the point that those extreme external highs are unstable.
Yeah, tribulation builds a more enduring internal strength, it seems.
It encourages us to see challenges not just as barriers, but as essential ingredients in becoming, well, more resilient and wise.
Another key wisdom highlighted is seeing your own flaws. The text calls knowing your own shortcomings a person's greatest wisdom.
Which is a sharp contrast to what it calls shrewdness, cleverly covering up faults. True wisdom isn't about appearing perfect, but honest self-assessment.
And it lays out 3 steps for practitioners. First, covering up, which it actually calls the beginning of awareness.
Interesting phrasing, that. Awareness starts when you notice you're covering up.
Then correcting the shortcomings. And finally, resolving them completely.
Awareness is step 1, sure, but the text really emphasizes that correcting is the most important step after that. You have to actively work to change those flaws.
And resolving.
Resolving, getting rid of the shortcoming entirely, is presented as the mark of the wisest. It takes real dedication.
Let's read that specific passage.
Okay. The text says, "A person's greatest wisdom is in clearly knowing their own shortcomings. The ability to resolve one's shortcomings after correcting them is something only the wisest would do."
Thinking about practical examples. Admitting you messed up on a team project, that's awareness. Actively working on, say, being less impatient because you realize that hurts your relationships, that's correcting.
Right, taking action.
And maybe seeking feedback from others to see your blind spots, and then really working to integrate that feedback. That's like moving towards resolution. It's a path of ongoing, honest self-improvement.
A process needing humility and consistent effort, turning that self-knowledge into real change.
Building on that internal work, the text then broadens the focus again to our place in the world. It states a person's value lies in understanding and fulfilling their obligations.
And the primary obligation of being alive, according to this teaching, is to save others.
Saving others sounds huge, right?
Yeah.
But the text grounds it in really everyday actions. Yes, it includes guiding people towards the Dharma, the teachings, and Guanyin Bodhisattva, the figure of compassion. But it also applies it much more broadly.
It does. It brings it right into the home and community. Things like respecting elders, caring for young people, even cooking, cleaning, managing a household, social work. These are all presented as ways of fulfilling obligations, as forms of saving lives in this context.
And it calls fulfilling these obligations a merit of mankind.
It elevates everyday responsibility, doesn't it? Links personal duty to the well-being of everyone, finding value in contributing to harmony in the family, the community.
Let's hear that passage too.
Right. It says, "A person's value lies in their understanding of duly fulfilling their obligations. To save people is one of the merits of mankind."
Volunteering somewhere, helping a neighbor, mentoring someone younger. Those seem like clear examples of saving others through service. But the text includes just doing your chores, contributing to your family, doing your job well. It redefines saving others away from just heroic acts to consistent, compassionate engagement with the world right around you.
It means you don't need a special title or role to live a life of value.
You just need to fulfill your obligations with awareness.
It provides a framework where seemingly ordinary actions become expressions of deeper purpose and merit.
This sense of purpose, how we engage inside and out, it loops back to happiness. The text distinguishes between, like, fleeting pleasures and something deeper.
Yes, the happiness stemming from a composed and peaceful state of mind.
And that state is seen as way more valuable than money or temporary fun like parties or games.
It's a stable happiness from an internal condition, free from the disturbances of greed, hatred, and delusion, often called the three poisons.
Let's take another break here, and when we return, we'll explore the idea of non-self and how letting go of the ego can open the door to lasting peace and happiness.
And it says, only by being non-self can we truly achieve this and be happy. What does non-self mean here?
Well, in this context, non-self generally refers to letting go of the illusion of a fixed, separate, independent self or ego. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, the impermanent nature of identity, which helps reduce attachment and the suffering that comes from defending that separate self.
Okay, so a serene mind, according to the text, it can face impermanence openly, isn't bothered by chasing fame or wealth, can kind of go with the flow, minimize painful emotions.
And is filled with inner tranquility, without dissatisfaction, suspicion, or complaint. It describes a state of inner freedom, really, unburdened by circumstances or ego demands, finding contentment right here, right now.
There's a passage on this kind of happiness that's quite vivid.
Let's hear it. The text reads, "The happiness stemming from a composed and peaceful state of mind is more valuable than all the wealth in the world. In your heart, there is only tranquility and not a shred of dissatisfaction, suspicion, or complaint."
Think about the feeling after a quiet walk versus the buzz of a party. The buzz fades fast, right? But the quiet walk might leave a deeper, more lasting peace.
Good comparison.
Or letting go of a grudge. That's actively releasing hatred, moving toward that serene state. Finding joy in simple things, a cup of tea, talking with a friend instead of always needing external validation or more stuff. That seems like living this idea. Indifference to fame and wealth, finding contentment within.
It fundamentally shifts where we look for fulfillment, from outside acquisition to internal cultivation and freedom.
But then conversely, the text is very clear about the roots of suffering.
Yes, it names them: greed, hatred, delusion, arrogance, doubt, and wrong views, the core negative states.
And it explains how these get ingrained, become habits, affecting our speech, our actions with great force, and just keep accumulating afflictions, perpetuating suffering.
It even gives an example of a wrong view, like judging someone who's genuinely devout with prejudice. It's a clouded perspective that distorts reality and leads to unwholesome actions and unhappiness.
Can we read the passage describing these sources of suffering?
Sure. It says, "Greed, hatred, delusion, arrogance, doubt, and wrong views affect a person's speech and conduct, because it brings together all kinds of suffering, such as greed, hatred, delusion, arrogance, doubt, and wrong views."
You see this play out all the time, don't you? Someone consumed by greed is never satisfied, always wanting more. That's suffering. Holding on to hatred just eats away at your own peace.
Absolutely.
Delusion, wrong views, thinking you know best when you don't, judging others unfairly. It leads to bad decisions, conflict. This passage makes it really clear. Suffering isn't just bad luck hitting you from outside, it's a direct result of these internal states.
And the text, thankfully, presents the antidote.
Which is compassion. It calls compassion the most important thing for any person. It even says hatred is a clear sign of lacking both compassion and wisdom.
Right. And cultivating compassion is described metaphorically as sowing wholesome seeds in the eighth consciousness. Now, the eighth consciousness, sometimes called the store consciousness in Buddhist thought, it's seen as this deep repository of all our karmic seeds, from past actions, intentions.
Okay.
So sowing wholesome seeds means performing acts, having intentions rooted in goodness. And the idea is these seeds will then ripen over time into positive karmic affinities.
Positive karmic affinities, like good conditions, positive relationships, opportunities showing up.
Exactly. Favorable conditions arising in your life as a result of past positive actions and intentions. So compassionate actions aren't just nice, they're actively shaping your future reality by planting those positive seeds.
Wow. So it's cause and effect again, but on this deeper internal level.
Face-to-face,
Let's read the passage on compassion.
Okay, it reads, "Compassion, on the other hand, is the most important thing for any person. And when those wholesome seeds ripen and blossom, positive karmic affinities come next.
Practicing small acts of kindness, being patient when it's hard, offering help, just genuinely wishing others well. These feel like ways you plant those wholesome seeds.
Definitely.
And often you do see results, don't you? People respond better. Maybe unexpected good things happen. You feel lighter. It really aligns with that idea of seeds ripening into positive affinities. It turns compassion from just a nice thought into a powerful practice.
Makes compassion an active force for positive transformation, both inside and out.
And finally, there's this powerful analogy from the Buddha himself about the effect of starting a spiritual life.
Ah, the torch analogy.
Yeah.
Yes. It's compared to bringing a torch into a dark house. The darkness, representing ignorance and suffering, is instantly dispelled.
That imagery is so striking. It suggests this potential for immediate change the moment you sincerely start on the path. And it adds that perseverance, sticking with it, turns the mind into a bright world.
Right. So while the first step can have an immediate impact, consistent practice is needed for that lasting clarity and peace.
And it connects all these teachings back to the core purpose. Learning the Dharma, these teachings, helps you become a virtuous person.
That's the ultimate application, isn't it? Not just understanding ideas, but genuine transformation that leads to ethical, beneficial actions in the world.
Let's share that final passage.
Okay. The Buddha once said, "For those who have begun to live a life of spirituality," letting you realize that by learning the Buddha Dharma, you can become a virtuous person.
Thinking about that torch, even just a few minutes of mindful breathing when you feel totally overwhelmed, can feel like bringing a tiny bit of light into that mental darkness. It offers some immediate relief.
It can, yeah.
And you often see profound positive change in people who commit to some path of growth or spiritual practice, right? Focusing on ethics, self-awareness. They genuinely seem to become, well, more virtuous people, living with more purpose, less conflict inside, just like the text describes.
These teachings offer both the inspiration of that initial spark and the practical steps for sustained change.
So wrapping up, what does all this mean for you listening right now? We've journeyed through these essentials of practicing Buddhism and uncovered, I think, layers of wisdom that feel incredibly relevant, even though they're ancient. We've explored how cause and effect really puts the power of change in your hands, how embracing impermanence can free you from suffering, how your thoughts are literally the architects of your happiness.
How hardship builds resilience, and how simple acts like fulfilling obligations and cultivating compassion can create merit and transform your reality.
Yeah. It's a message that cultivation isn't about escaping life, is it? It's about engaging with it, fully, mindfully, with intention, moment by moment.
Well said.
So here's a thought to leave you with, circling back to that really powerful idea. If happiness truly is just a thought, what kind of thoughts are you choosing to cultivate today?
Definitely something worth pondering.
If you'd like to delve deeper into Master Lu's teachings or the source texts we discussed, or if anything we talk about sparked questions for you, you can find more information and ways to reach out in the show notes for this deep dive.
Please do.
And please, if there are topics you're curious about, maybe something you'd love for us to deep dive into next, email us. Let us know. We always appreciate hearing from you.